Yeah, I've seen
Well, Sam
transcripts
Sutherland
over
started it.
5 hours.
He just did it. Sam
Yeah.
said it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Dave.
I don't know what the rule is, but it's a fast rule. I meant to look into that.
I think it depends on whether or not you're paying millions of dollars to YouTube or nothing, or
No, we have some videos. Maybe it was on Sam's account, not Doug's. I don't know. Maybe it was Doug's. I don't see. You might have something there. Maybe you have to have a paid account to go over for. I don't know, a pro account.
Well,
I have no
I'm
idea.
going to bring up one, Colin, if you don't mind. This is coming up for me. I'm going to bring up one point
Sure.
of the GCC, which is we've talked a lot about a knowledge repository, but we've never collaborated and built a collective where we all own the knowledge repository. And then we also.
That's not true. That's not true.
Where is it?
Well, I was just going to point out that
what's my key? I just want to get the key from
the key is your theory of mind, and Barry's theory of mind forgot and thought that he did write down a definition for spirituality, but there isn't one there. Mine's there.
No. When I say knowledge repository, I mean physically the data that is being collected in ones and zeros from the recording of this conversation being stored on a hard drive where we all have access to. And I think
you mean an entity's
I mean
organized.
a knowledge repository that can be accessed by all members of the knowledge repository, the people that are write, like the people that are talking.
It is available.
Information into it.
It's available to everybody, but it's not turnkey for anybody.
You're right.
Available doesn't mean it's owned by all of us. Meaning
that's the sticking point.
Daniel Harris.
That's the sticking.
Yeah, me and Daniel had a long conversations about it being on his Gmail account. And then he was like, oh, take it off, put it on yours. And then it's on Sam's account right now with his YouTube. But I'm saying I would like to have a non-dominium, non-owner, like a trust that we all agree to put it into that trust and put all of the data that's collected into a place where we can all access it evenly and equally at any time, meaning we can't write over it, but we can read it, we can pull it out, synthesize it, but there's always a secure knowledge repository, if that makes sense.
Colin's right.
Yes.
I did not put a definition in the glossary. I thought I did, but evidently it's somewhere. I know I've written about it, it's just evidently not there. I thought it was, but it's not.
Yeah, fish always forgets about the water, right? Yeah, well, I was going to bring up the point. I guess I'm making it up in a way, about how we were talking about nature shows away. And
speaking on nature, do you need to go to the bathroom, Barry? Are you okay?
No, I was looking, I put the definition of emotion in there, but not I was just checking the glossary. I put emotion, but not spirit. Awe is an emotion. And awe is a common emotion that's associated with spirituality. Awe and wonder, for example. Wonderment.
I'm proposing it's really difficult to define spirituality to something concrete.
Well, it's abstract.
But anyway, it's very abstract.
I drew a laugh out of Nora Bateson one time, Colin, when I was explaining something that's very abstract, and you asked, in some version, you asked for a concrete example of it. And you can't give a concrete example of an abstraction. It's sort of by definition, it's an abstraction.
No, you can't give. That's not true. You can't give all the concrete examples from an abstraction, but you can give some.
But isn't the word itself an abstraction? The word spirituality, spirit is not material. It's not concrete.
But it's not. What it is, it's an extrapolation from the abstraction that gets you to the concrete. So you have to extrapolate somehow with some.
Well, I'm saying it's a direct contradiction. Meaning, from what I understand about reality, is there's waves, and then there's particles.
Particles, concrete. Waves are a mathematical abstraction.
Yeah, well, I like the conversation. Go ahead.
So I was just saying the word spiritual and material, if you look at those two, to me is the difference between waves. This is my own view. I'm not saying I'm correct, but
it's
waves
an artistic
and
view.
Particles. Well, if you take a wave, like for example, a neutrino, there was some big breakthrough this last year that neutrinos have a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of measurable because of gravitational waves of mass, whereas the word neutrino meant they don't. They're neutral. They don't have mass. And so that is what I think humankind is understanding, is that things that we thought were the smallest thing is an atom. And then we keep breaking it down into smaller pieces. And then not only did we break it down to small pieces, is we found that those pieces don't function the way things do, to quote Richard Feynman, on the material world. They literally do not like, you got a wave, you got a particle, because the particle's over here, the wave, it's not exactly, but the wave aspect of reality to me is how I define spirituality. That is spirituality.
Yeah, there is that duality of the
word comes from breath, by the way. When you breathe, you have air moving in and out of your lungs, but the phenomenon of breathing is it's a wave, right? In and out, right? So the word spirit comes from spira, which means breath in Greek, and in Latin, breath is like our word halate, inhale, exhale, the hail.
Yeah.
So when they wanted to show that somebody was excited and breathing, and they got flushed, and their cheeks reddened, how did you show their cheeks reddened? You drew a halo around the top of their head. That was the artistic way of saying, they're enthused. But it was
really,
yeah.
That's not the origin of the halo. No way.
It is.
I was going to argue about something else, but you slid that one in on me.
Yeah. So when you're enthused and it's excited, and you're enthused and you inhale and you oxygenate your blood, and the oxygen makes your blood red and your cheeks redden. They light up. And how do they show that? You could, if you just painted somebody looking sallow and somebody looking red cheeked, the viewer wouldn't quite get the message. So they actually drew a halo to emphasize the glowing. And
it didn't give the dichotomy of spirituality at the time, because everything was spiritual. So it meant that they were, it made sense.
It did. If you go back, I think in the Western culture in Europe, those people were glowing because of their anointment, because a lot of people thought that kings and queens were literally divine from gods.
Yeah.
They were direct descendants.
The coronation gods. Is that, that's what the coronation's all
about. The corona and the halo, they're all really similar ideas, different language.
Isn't that freaky? Crazy monkeys.
But we use our word enthused, perfectly ordinary word, but literally it's suffused with the divine spirit. N plus theos is enthused. That's suffused with the divine spirit. That's what it meant, was where the word came from.
So I'm still trying to circle back without breaking the flow to the nature aspect of the conversation, and also GCC context a bit, but more to the fact that when things are flowing in a happy manner in the forest or the ecosystem, that's all great, but there's also a filtering that's happening, keeping other things at bay. So there's the lion eats the gazelle, right?
And the gazelle gets running faster than the lion. It develops speed to escape the lion.
But a few gazelles are still eaten right now.
Yeah, because you can't stay fast forever.
And a few trees are blocking out some other sucklings, right? So that they can't grow. The canopy block. So what I'm saying is there's a balance and a filtering going on. Nature does that filtering without emotion for the most part. We don't.
Well, that's not true. Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to just, that's not true. The fact that we've separated our thinking, our logic, our way of life from nature, and the fact that all of the literature is written man versus nature, man versus himself, that separation, whereas other cultures never separated, they kept that intertwining of nature and humans not being separate. That to me is the big conversation that we're all having, is it natural that we create the Industrial Revolution and raise the CO2 levels? And is this a natural effect?
Yes. I agree. That's the whole Schmattenberger thing, right? Like, are we living the imagined order that we should be, which is the words of Yuval Harari with the Sapiens, the imagined orders. That's a big new concept for me. It's a word that means so much.
Go back to the word emotion, the actual word itself, not our common understanding of its usage today. E, out of motion, or origin of motion. The origin of motion, if you want to say what's the origin of motion, if you take the time derivative of state, you get emotion, right? So anything that is not static, that changes, even if it changes very slowly, still has a time derivative. And because we learn relatively rapidly, our emotion, our time derivative of change of state is quite visible.
Basically, noticing a change is what you're saying. Noticing a change.
Time derivative of the change of state of growing grass, you go, I don't see it growing. But if you wait long enough, you see it change.
Yeah.
So emotion merely means the time derivative that's causing things to change even slowly over time versus rapidly over time. We recognize rapid change and we call it emotion, excitement, movement, energy. But if it's very slow, you might not notice it, but it's still there.
But
yes, and that emotion.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish the analogy with the nature. I think I can finish it by saying that, and it goes to what you're saying as a counter idea, Josh, of us thinking too much of being separate from nature and trying to analyze, us as separate from nature, the animals and then the humans. I do agree we're part of the ecosystem on that level, but then there's that magic thing that the God-given cognitive revolution that we've had that give what I call animals plus to my when I try to find common words with my fundamentalist friends, because they say, well, I'm not an animal, I'm a God-given spirit, I'm not like the animals. You calling me an animal? I say, okay, animals plus. I'll say animals plus, and that plus is the cognitive animated part, where we can
animated, movable.
But not only that, we make the fact that you can go get a lawyer and strike a little bit of ink on a piece of paper, and all of a sudden you own something, right? Like, holy, wow, isn't that cool?
That's an agreed upon fiction, and that is what allows us to work together as opposed to killing each other.
But animals are territorial too. Animals are territorial. They're just territorial.
yeah. I'm sure the gazelle that got eaten felt it, and the orangutan. You see in animals they do mourn, elephants mourn, and so it's not like we're the only. There is a gradient there between. Does the earthworm have feelings? Like, that's the question, right? It has nervous system.
The earthworm can follow a gradient. How do you think the earthworm finds food? It goes from a space where there's no food, where the odors are coming in, and it goes in the direction where the odors are suggesting there's where your next meal is coming from.
What I'm suggesting, though, is that we have the power to interfere with the natural order of nature.
Well, beavers will build a dam. Trees and build a dam.
Yeah, and also we can, and so in as much, it goes back to the point that I was trying to make about nature doesn't have the imagined order wrapped around the feelings of the tiger ate the gazelle. Well, that's a good question, but I don't think it does in the same way that we've perverted it. So we've perverted it to be something because just for the essential fact that is in our nature. And here's the grand question: were we meant to coexist, or are we always going to eat each other's lunch?
Well, another grand question. Sorry, go ahead, Barry. You're getting me excited.
By the way, have you ever watched a sunflower for a whole day? A sunflower faces the sun, and as the sun moves across the sky, the sunflower will follow it. That means it's got quote unquote muscles. It's got something that can change its position, like this, okay? And it's taking data, and it's now if I'm following the sun, I'm doing the same thing as a sunflower. Motion.
What you're saying to me?
We're all hippies now.
Well, no, instead of being a hippie, how about being a martial artist? And the idea of martial arts is to take the cognitive understanding of human behavior of this beautiful device that is our body, and using it poorly to change the animation and the motion to abstract into newer cognition. Meaning, if you ever see someone catch an arrow out of the air, or if you see them blindfolded catch an arrow out of the air, what the fuck is going on there?
The dance. The dance.
Yeah, that's
I'm
pretty crazy stuff. Pretty crazy stuff.
It is crazy stuff, and humans have, for thousands and thousands of years, have had the ability to take and transcend the motion, the animation, the being, the human being, and push it to places that are outside of space and time. And a good example my friend just showed me is if you take a blindfold and you go into a soccer field, try to see how far you can run before your brain tells you to stop because you're going to hit something.
Right. Yeah.
And that's changing your cognition.
Right. The fear of,
and you can do the same thing with VR space. You can go into a space that you know is not real, but watch your human body change, meaning they have those planks that you can put at the top of a building, and the wood is aligned the same way as it is in the video game in the VR space, and you'll watch your heart rate go through the roof and your body will change. And you could just take off the goggles and know this is not real, but put them back on and you can't walk across that board because it looks like it's at 100 stories up.
Yeah.
And these kind of changes of pushing the body to experiment with its understanding of reality, of consciousness, of cognition, of where you are in space and time is the martial arts. And when they say meditation, a lot of people don't realize that there is a place you can get to mentally where space and time goes away and you have to rely on other cognition inside of your brain space that is outside of the physical, where you have to extrapolate and imagine a world that is not the world around you. And there's been, documented cases of people reporting back that they were no longer in their body, but they had cognition and they were doing other things. And people call that woo, like you always say, Colin, it's a woo thing. But if you haven't experienced not being in the cognition of inside of your eyeballs looking out, but traveling to other destinations and other spiritual worlds, how do you explain that? How do you measure that?
Dream sleep. I do it on that every night, but most nights I go into a dream state and I'm somewhere out of my body in an imaginary world. My brain is processing this imaginary world where the laws of physics don't quite apply. Things.
Yep.
No, that's not true. Not true. Just not the way you used to.
Well, I mean, the story.
No, you're creating them.
Science fiction doesn't always
irrelevant.
Laws of physics.
It's still the laws of physics, and that's my point. It's just that how
it's not the law of physics. It's your brain. Have you ever flown in your dreams, Colin?
Oh,
what I'm saying is that
my first dream.
It's interesting. Yeah, I love the floating ones and the flying ones, but the idea.
But that's the cognitive dissonance in there.
What's the term? What's the scientific term for this? The fact that everything emanates from the brain chemistry and there's nothing else. It's the mind-body duality, isn't it? The mind-brain duality.
I don't know what word you're looking for.
Yeah, there's a position on whether there's anything other than the mind being sourced from the brain and chemistry.
The mind is what the brain does. That's a quote from Marvin Minsky.
And I don't think there's anything else.
What the computer does, the mind is what the brain does.
Now, if some cosmic rays or magnet, they've shown that they can put magnets around people's heads and change their normal temperament. And so and dreams could be another version of nature's magnets, helping us. I guess it's my intuition is that it's some kind of well, I don't want to say the word rest, but
it's recreation,
reboot, some rebooting of all the heavy duty stuff. It's, I don't know, is it
Barry, can you say that word again? He said recreation. If you can take
Recreation
that in.
is recreation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
What is recreation? Recreation.
Or like the flywheel that's just kind of going with inertia and nobody's at the steering wheel. Like
So can I give you a concept that changed my
that nobody's at the
understanding?
steering wheel like you're used to. That's what I should say.
Yeah, well, so the steering wheel's the brain, and I always thought this was the only steering wheel. And then I listened to a TED talk, and I'm still trying to understand. I always thought neurons just exist here in the fatty part of your brain.
They're in your
They're
belly.
everywhere.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, we're still discovering neurons. What if there are neurons in your pinky that we had never discovered? I mean, who knows? There's like the more I study the body, the more information I get from ancient cultures that understood these things way back in the Vedanta age of the Indus Valley 5,000, 6,000 years ago. And they had maps and they drew the energetic channels of the body. And then you go into modern day Western medicine and you overlap those maps with the modern maps and they align.
That's a whole lot of got to see that.
You know,
I have to show it to you.
Oscillating circuit in your heart.
Well, that's fine.
It doesn't keep accurate time. It intentionally keeps erratic time because if it kept perfect time, you wouldn't live. The beat of the heart cannot be regular. It has to be aperiodic. And there's a circuit, you can map it out. It's an actual electrical circuit in the heart that generates an aperiodic repetition pattern.
And that's obviously not by design. That's by nature.
Because if it was designed that way, you wouldn't live. You can
what I'm saying,
standing waves in your blood flow.
Evolution made it that way. Like the gangular vein that goes, or whatever they call that goes down along the
just to share with you, Colin, the idea of the philosophy of Taoism, the ism of the Tao, that is a philosophy based on aligning with nature.
Yeah.
So the 81 passages in the Tao Te Ching are conundrums, are little scientific, mathematical, brilliantly written in polytext to make a human being realize that they are not separate from nature and that all the forces of nature are inside of the human being. And so when they get too uppity and start creating class systems and rules and regulations, if you read those 81 passages, get a good translation of it because it's not in English. But if you read it, it makes you have to question your place in the natural world.
Is that what the cones kind of?
No, they're not cones.
Just thoughtful.
Cones come from Zen Buddhism. He's talking about Taoism. There are two different philosophies there. They have similar features, but Zen Buddhism has koans and Taoism has the Tao Te Ching. They're similar systems, but they're distinct.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the story. The way I heard it is there was a gentleman that was a scientific master, much like a Newton or just a brilliant nature scientist. And he has all this knowledge. And he decides that society is just annoying him and he's just going to leave society and go off and not share his knowledge. And the king says, you can't fucking do that because you hold all the knowledge of our collective wisdom in our society. And if you leave, we won't have that. So you have to write it down. So he said, all right, fine, I'll write it down. And he writes down 81 passages and then pieces the fuck out. And those passages, if you read them, are still contemporary to this day. And one of the things that he says is if society becomes so top heavy where the top classes have all the money, then they will start giving charity and be so full of themselves thinking that they're helping others with their charity work, as opposed to actually spreading the wealth around. They're divvying it out with control and power. And they feel good about themselves because they gave a little bit, like 2% to the poor. And that is pious and bullshit behavior. And it's amazing that we have separated so much from nature in terms of the power over, if we went back into nature, we would probably start eating each other again. You know, I mean, that would be
Yeah, that's what I'm
cannibalism
talking
would
about.
be-
You might not
That's
have
what I'm
any
talking about.
ethics. You might throw away,
Well,
5,000 years of
what is
ethics.
the natural balance? That's what I'm asking. What is the human natural balance? And have we,
well, aren't we trying to find the pendulum is swinging back and forth between different groups?
well, they say the IQ goes up, whatever that is. The IQ, whatever statistical validity you give it, it keeps going up. And that's why I learned, which is interesting. They keep,
And the dumb people,
they
keep killing the
readjust it.
smart
They keep
people.
readjusting the bar so that the average person is at 100. But
Think about what I
overall,
said, Colin. They were willing to kill this guy if he didn't give his knowledge.
yes.
Did you ever see the movie Koyaanisqatsi? You ever heard this word or seen the movie Koyaanisqatsi? It's only music and images. But Koyaanisqatsi is a Native American word that literally means life out of balance. Life out of balance, Koyaanisqatsi. Comes from Native American culture. It was a very popular movie about 40, 50 years ago.
Life out of balance. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Look up, you got to spell it right. It's Koy. I'm not sure how many A's, N-I, Koyaanisqatsi, Qatsi. But it was an Omni movie that just played for years and years and years. And it was just music and
Oh yeah, I saw this movie.
Yeah, and slow motion scenes of nature.
There was another one that came out after this that was influenced, I think, in the 90s, which was, I want to say, Baraka or something. It was
Yes, I think you're right. There was a sequel to it. And
Yeah.
I may be right. I don't remember the name of the sequel. Koyaanisqatsi was the first one. And I think maybe Ira Glass's uncle wrote the music. Who's the composer? Ira Glass's
Philip
uncle.
Glass.
Philip Glass. I think Philip Glass wrote the music for Koyaanisqatsi. You can double check that, but I'm pretty sure he wrote the music for it. I don't know who did the videography. I don't remember.
These are the movies that influenced me to be a systems thinker, to start thinking directions. And the movie that I don't hear people talking about is The Earth from Space in 2012 from Nova. That was one of the most influential movies I've ever seen. It was the first time there was multiple satellites measuring every droplet of water on the planet. Like, I think people are missing that we can actually measure each droplet of water and watch how it interacts with the whole Earth.
Yep. So, well, I don't know about you guys. It's after 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, and at some point I'm going to have to go eat lunch before it's time to eat dinner.
I'm going to do the same.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Barry.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Colin. This is. I hope we can figure out a balance between humans, nature, and our trajectory of where we want to be in terms of a balance of how many people will be on this earth.
Yeah, I want to see that there is an earth for your child to grow up in that's got a future, that's not going to, make us go extinct. Which a lot of people.
I hold up in the mountains at 4,600 feet to ensure that future for her, but I don't know that she'll have friends to play with. I hope they come up and if there is a giant earthquake and a tsunami in California, that's why I went to that altitude.
Wow.
So everybody have a good weekend. Maybe we'll see some of you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Yeah. See you later.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sam. Cheers.